I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Abdirazak Mohammed, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Somalia. You have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to begin by congratulating you, Madam President, on assuming the presidency of the Security Council for the month of February, and wish you and your delegation success for the remainder of the month. I also commend the permanent representative of the brotherly country of Tunisia for his exemplary leadership at the helm of the Council last month. I acknowledge the presence of Jim Swan, a Special Representative of the Secretary General for Somalia and head of the United Nations Assistance Mission for Somalia. Madera, Special Representative of the African Union Commission, Chairperson for Somalia. Madam Rita Laranjiha, European Union Managing Director for Africa, and thank them for their briefings. It is a great honor to be addressing the UN Security Council on Somalia's progress and remaining challenges. The UN Security Council members, alongside the majority of other partner nations within the UN family, continue to play an important role in Somalia's development alongside our resilient people and government, both bilaterally and multilaterally. The Somali government takes note of the report of the Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, on the situation in Somalia, which was presented to the Security Council today. The report captures succinctly the political, security, and socioeconomic challenges the Somali nation must overcome in order to continue our path to deepening democracy, development, stability, and security for Somalia. It is important to note the Somali people will be forever indebted for the support of multifaceted partnerships that continue to contribute to our national progress, especially as we navigate forward to a better future. A bright and confident future. I believe we are the masters of our own destiny. Political developments. Madam President, on the present political impasse on the implementation of the 17 September Agreement, context is important. The federal government of Somalia has worked consistently in a determined manner to hold federal election as stipulated by the Provisional Constitution. It should be noted, soon after the commencement of this administration, work to implement the holding of one person, one vote began, simply in order to ensure the widest participation of citizens to choose their leaders for the first time in 50 years. A practical model for realizing this goal was designed and negotiated with the FMS before they and the FGS signed an agreement in 2018. I'm very much aware of this because I led on the negotiations on behalf of the federal government and as a member of the Federal Negotiations Technical Committee, working closely with the federal member states. After this agreement, a draft law was formulated by the executive branch based on the agreement and was presented to the federal parliament for legislative scrutiny and voted on before the president assented it into law in February 2020. As stipulated both by the political agreement and the subsequent election law, the process was to be led by the National Independent Electoral Commission. However, within a short period, the FMS leaders reneged on the early agreement on one person, one vote, and instead expressed a preference for a selection model similar to the one used in 2016, where the leadership of the FGS and FMS in effect chose the members of both houses of the federal parliament who would then become the electors of the President and the speakers. The selective process has rightfully earned the label of an incubator for levels of corruption, irregularities, and patronage, favored by elites whose sole interest is to hold the future of Somalia to ransom and maintain patronage for the few. Despite the moral and political imperative to implement the agreed election model, Somalia's international partners pressured the government to compromise with the federal member states. Once again, and as a result of a series of consultation with the federal member state leadership held in Lusamreb, known as Lusamreb Conference 1, 2, and 3, a final meeting of the National Consultative Council in Mogadishu reached a political agreement on the new modalities of election on September 17, 2020. It is to be noted that the federal government, in agreeing to this selected model, has not only compromised on one person, one vote, but it also had agreed to the following as demanded by the federal member states. For each seat, the federal government of Somalia wanted at least 301 individuals to vote for each respective parliamentary seat, but the federal member states wanted only 101. The FGS agreed. The FGS proposed elections should be held in up to 4 or minimum of 3 locations in each FMS in order to seek greater legitimization of the new parliament. The FMS leaders wanted 2 locations. The FGS again accepted their wish. The penholders of this agreement were the federal member state leaders, in particular, the presidents of Jubaland and Puntland, and led to the agreement being welcomed, celebrated, and endorsed by all prospective presidential candidates, the federal member states, international community, and by all relevant political actors. Regrettably, after all of this, the penholders of this agreement continue to refuse to implement the political agreement, requesting further concessions after another to address perceived concerns with regards to the Gedo region and the election committees. This was also accepted by the federal government of Somalia, and a technical committee representing all stakeholders, including ministerial representatives from both Jubaland and Puntland, finalized the outstanding issues in Baidoa on 16 February. After 2 days of discussions, the Baidoa Technical Committee's announcement, an agreement, and welcomed by all, including the international community, His Excellency President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed Farmajo extended an invitation to the federal member state leaders to meet at the National Consultative Council on February 18 in Mogadishu to conclude the FGS-FMS Technical Committee's work and fully implement the 17 September agreement so that the process of elections can begin without any further delays. Madam President, regrettably, the 2 federal member state leaders who were the penholders of the 17th September political agreement and have remained a constant obstacle to its finalization once again refused to attend the meeting, once again choosing to hold ransom the aspirations of the Somali people for stability in an effort to achieve a transition in an undemocratic manner. In fact, rather than travel to Mogadishu to attend the planned National Consultative Council meeting, the 2 FMS leaders chose to offer a tacit support to a planned protest by prospective presidential candidates, which the FGS accepted, provided that it adheres to public health and is held in a peaceful manner as our Constitution stipulates. The government fully recognizes the right to peacefully demonstrate as a right guaranteed by the Constitution. We are committed to providing the Somali people with the opportunity to express themselves and their demands without undermining public order or destroying public or private property. However, the prospective presidential candidates not only disregarded the government's measures, but chose a clear path of illegality and insurrection. They chose to bring forth a militia out onto the streets of Mogadishu. And in fact, the head of this militia openly stated in public, and I quote, "There is no government and we are taking control," unquote. This is of no surprise because on the night of February 18th, the opposition group leaders declared that there is no government. They have been saying this in Somalia, which is not true given Parliament passed the election law based on the political agreement, which under Article 3 clearly states the legislative and executive branches of government to have full authority, and furthermore, the executive is responsible for the management of the elections precisely in order to avoid a vacancy of power. These acts have led to loss of life of members of our security personnel who have taken an oath to protect the Somali nation from enemies, both foreign and domestic, and I extend my condolences and the gratitude of the nation to their families and loved ones, and wish those injured speedy recovery. The Somali people are tired of war and yearning for stability, security, and government which truly represents their aspirations. And key to achieving this is holding a free and fair elections as agreed by all the parties on the 17th of September and finalized by the Baidoa Technical Committee no more than a week ago. Madam President, denying the truth doesn't change the facts. And I'm afraid what we have here is an opposition whose only interest at the behest of external forces is to create red herring from the fact that their sole political goal has always been to cause political crisis in order to foment constitutional disorder. The fact is that the only way to have a political transition is through election, not threats or outlandish claims of political and social regression to a painful era the Somali people will never accept to returning to. The simple truth is, no amount of undemocratic calls for removal of a sitting president without election, the foreign axis of instability supporting the opposition, nor the threat of violence will determine the destiny of the Somali nation. Somalia's destiny will be determined by the Somali people who have the confidence, experience, and resolve to ensure what lies ahead for Somalia will never be the pain of the past. Unfortunately, the Somali federal government strongly believes there's blatant foreign interference in the internal political affairs of Somalia from those who claim to be helping to stabilize Somalia to those who offer princely reward in order to intentionally sabotage and prolong the electoral process in the hope of leadership change. This axis of foreign influence clearly has a strategy of prolonging the holding of elections by forcing the remaining two FMS leaders to refuse the agreement in order to provide space for prospective presidential candidate in an attempt to create a narrative of discord. Only today, the prospective presidential candidates have announced the holding of demonstrations next Friday and are clearly timed to coincide with this meeting in the hope of instilling fear of Armageddon. Rest assured, the prospective presidential candidates have and will continue to be provided the freedom and political space to express their views, and government bodies, as well as security forces, will fulfill their statutory duty to protect the public against the dark forces of extremism and the silent enemy of the pandemic while they express their views openly. However, the security and well-being of Somali people will remain paramount, and no armed insurrection under the guise of a political demonstration will be accepted. There is no doubt elections will happen once the final two FMS leaders endorsed the finalization of the 17th September Agreement negotiated by their respective technical representatives. Upon the agreement of these two FMS leaders, the FGS is willing and able to begin the holding of the election within the month. The President of Somalia once again invites the leaders of Puntland and Jubaland to join the consultative meeting in Mogadishu to finalize the recommendations of the technical committee. The completion of the electoral process based on dialogue and compromise is vital for the peace and prosperity of the Somali people. Madam President, on security developments, defeating Al-Shabaab remains Somalia's key security priority. We have been engaged in a successful fight against a determined international terrorist organization with regional...
I do apologize for interrupting. You've kindly covered a lot of ground and some important issues, but would it be possible to come to your final remarks now? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I will then just go ahead and conclude. Madam President, to conclude, Somalia has truly come a very long way on a journey in which many thought it would not make it past the first few hurdles. Somalia's economic success is a fruit of the collective efforts of the Somali government, people, and our valuable international partners. The Somali people are resilient and committed to building a better future for themselves of which they can be proud. As for politics, Somalia's political process has developed from the period in which it was initiated and developed by international partners only. However, since 2012, and in particular the last 4 years, Somali leaders have dealt with complex political issues without the supervision of the international community. This has in turn made the Somali people have confidence in their governance and their leaders. And despite recent events, the President's invitation to the remaining 2 federal member state leaders stands without delay. Because rebuilding an inclusive, progressive, and prosperous Somalia is fundamental for all Somalis, it is the commitment of this government to honor this noble objective by delivering free and fair elections while continuing to safeguard the physical, health, and financial future of the Somali people. I thank you all.